to catch my breath.
Hello everyone, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel, Nose in a Book. I am here to film my September wrap-up for you, and I have to make this quick because my phone is about to die and that is what I am filming on. So I told you guys in my October TBR that if I didn't finish any of the books I was reading in September that I would include them, so you guys know that I'm going to continue reading them. So I have 3 books that I started in the month of September that I just didn't get around to finishing. I haven't had as much time to read the past couple of days, so I'm going to show you those first and then we'll get into the ones I finished. So the first book that I am still currently reading, or rather listening to, is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is the unabridged version as narrated by Rob Inglis, and I'm loving it. This is a reread for me, and I am reading it for the Ostentatious Book Club pick of the month of August, September. There we go. I can't remember months. The Hobbit is the prequel to the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Lord of the Rings can be a little bit daunting because it is so extensive and detailed and long and a little bit drawn out. But this is quite whimsical and lovely. This follows the Hobbit Bilbo Baggins on his adventure with a group of dwarves who are trying to reclaim their lost treasure, which has been taken from them back a long time ago by a dragon. And the dragon is still guarding the hoard of the treasure. So it just follows their whole adventure leading up to getting to the mountain where the treasure is and where the dragon is, and then past and beyond that. You guys have probably watched the movies at some point. They came out the last couple of years ago, but I really highly recommend the book, and I'll talk about it more in my wrap-up and how I'm liking the audiobook, but just know, highly recommend. So the next book that I'm still currently reading is The Clockwork Crown by Beth Cato. This is a steampunk series. I think it just might be a duet with a couple of novellas tied in there. But the first book, this is the second book in the series. The first book follows our main character Octavia, who is a Medician. And Medicians are a group of people who have basically magic healing powers. And they get these powers from something called the Lady's Tree. And the Lady's Tree allows them to not only heal people's ailments with herbs and such, but also to hear their ailments. So they're able to sense what is wrong with their patient by hearing the music of their body and the music of their ailments. It's really cool. Octavia in the first book is sent by Miss Percival, who is the leader of the School of Medicians, to this small town village area in like their big kingdom that is being wreaked havoc on by disease. Their kingdom is currently at war, and so there's a lot of political stuff going on as well, and so she embarks on this mission to get to these people in this village, and a whole bunch of action and political intrigue and everything ensues from that point. That was in the first book. This is the continuation of that, and I won't go into detail about it because obviously I don't want to spoil the first book, but I've actually been really enjoying this, and this is my first steampunk series, and I've really liked it a lot. So I think I did a wrap-up for The Clockwork Dagger, which is the first book, last year sometime. So if I can find it, I'll link it in the description, but if not, I'll just talk about it a bit more in my wrap-up. The next book that I am still currently reading, which I can't believe I haven't finished it yet because it's itty bitty, and that is Quidditch Through the Ages by Kenilworthy Wisp, also by J.K. Rowling. This is the original like Hogwarts library copies of the Quidditch Through the Ages, and I also have Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and it is just so much fun to read these. And since I didn't get around to reading the Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, I decided to pick these little guys up and do a reread on these as well, and I just didn't get a chance to finish this one. I'm about 14 pages in, and it's really short, so I probably will finish tonight before I go to bed. But yeah, I just didn't get quite finished with this one before the end of September. If you don't know already, this follows the making and history of Quidditch. So it's kind of an informational guide to the game. So those are all the books that I am still currently reading, but there were a couple of books that I did finish in the month of September. The first book I don't have a physical copy of because it's an ebook, but it is the novella The Deepest Poison, also by Beth Cato. This is part of the Clockwork Dagger series that I just mentioned earlier, and I'll try to insert a picture here. So the Clockwork Dagger, I already talked about. This novella particularly follows Miss Percival, and I can't talk too much about what it goes into. This is technically a prequel one to the first book, but don't read it before the first book. It might actually say 0.5, it might say 1.5, but definitely don't read it before the first book because it definitely spoils something about the first book. So don't read it first. Read it after you read the first book, and then it gives you a little more insight into one of our characters. But yeah, don't read it before the first one. This one I gave 3 stars. It was a solid story. It gave us a little bit more information, a little inside information about one of our characters from Clockwork Dagger, but it wasn't amazing. I didn't feel like it was like entirely necessary because it was all pretty well implied throughout the book. It was good, but it wasn't amazing. The next book that I want to talk about today is W. Juliet by Imura. This is volume 8. I've been reading this series, sorry, that like is weirdly glary. I've been reading this series for a long time, and this is over halfway through the series now. This series follows our 2 main characters, Makoto Amano and Ito Miura. And they are going to school together, and they both want to be in the acting field, but I can't talk too much about it because it will spoil the first volume for you. So yes, there is definitely a love story in here, and I just really love the characters, and I also love a lot of our side characters that we get to meet in this volume. If you guys want to read a cute, romancy, like high school days type manga, I highly recommend this series. It's super sweet. I gave this one 4 stars. This next book kind of surprised me because I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did, and that is Compromised by Kate Noble. This is like a Victorian-ish romance novel, and I got it for $1 at Bookman's, I think, and it just looked kind of cute, and so I thought I would pick it up. And you know, Victorian romance novels are really awesome to me because, you know, Mr. Darcy. But anyways, this book was actually quite good. I was expecting just like a cheesy romance, and it was very cheesy. It had all the tropes. It was very, very cheesy, but I found it to be a lot more witty, a lot more funny. I loved a lot of the dialogue between our 2 main characters. This book follows our main character, Gail Alton, and she is a bookish girl who's not very, you know, flirtatious, and she doesn't really care about getting married. Her family up to this point has been traveling the world, and she's been getting a lot of education in language and things like that, but she's never stuck in one place for very long, and now her father has just remarried and they've moved back to London. So now she's being forced to kind of enter London society along with her sister, who is the typical perfect, like, sweet, basically like the perfect lady in society. And so her stepmother's goal is to get her perfect sister married off, and obviously, unfortunately, Gail also has to be present. Now, you would think this has the basic evil stepmother trope, but it takes a different twist on that, which I really enjoyed. The sisterhood in this, you would expect, again, Gail to be jealous of her sister, but instead they actually have a really great relationship. Like, they were really sweet to each other. They really loved each other, trusted each other. It was really awesome. And then you have our romance. Our main guy character is Maximilian Viscount Fontaine, and he is going to be an heir, and his father has decided that it is time for him to marry and give him some grandchildren and start doing what he's supposed to be doing, and he really doesn't want to, but the father has now threatened to disown him if he does not get married within the next 3 months. Now, this all being said, fast forward, and he is trying to find a bride, and ends up finding himself in a very compromising position with Gail's sister. But unbeknownst to everyone else, Gail and him had a pretty compromising situation a bit earlier. But it does not start out as a romance in any way, because they really don't like each other at all. And then, to make matters worse, he's found in a compromising situation with Gail's sister, and ends up engaged to her. And then I guess I'll leave you guys to read to find out what happens from there. But I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was going in a direction, and then it played those tropes off totally differently than I expected. I loved the romance. It was a bit of a slow burn, and it had a lot more depth to it than I was expecting. Now, of course, a lot of it wrapped up a little bit too nicely, and it was a little bit too perfect. But it is a romance novel after all. We're supposed to have hope for our lives when we read this and not be in despair. So I definitely enjoyed this. If you guys are looking for a good Victorian romance that's very Pride and Prejudice-esque or Beauty and the Beast-esque, I would highly recommend this book. I gave this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I have Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander, or J.K. Rowling. This is the original copy, again, like the little paperbacks. This one is supposed to be Harry Potter's textbook, and I was so happy to pick these up because they all have like the writing in them, like Harry, Ron, and Hermione like all wrote in the book. And I just really thought it was super witty and adorable, and I loved rereading this. There's such fun information about all of the creatures, and especially with like Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them when that came out, like just reading all about all of those creatures again is just so much fun. And then also you get those little snippets of like inside jokes from the actual book that Harry and Ron mostly are writing in the book, or drawing sketches of like some of the creatures, and it's really fun. So I highly recommend this one. I gave this one 5 stars. How could I not? It's just so sweet and lovely. The next book that I have for you guys is a bit of a different read for me. I mostly read fiction and fantasy and such, but this one was a Christian living book written by Frances Chan, and that is Crazy Love. I won't go into too much detail about this, but this is just regarding God's love for his creation and what our response to that should be. I don't know what to really say about this one. Just because it's not something I normally read and review on my channel. I don't really talk about these types of subjects very often because I know they can be very, very like controversial, and so I don't like to bring that up because I feel like it like drags things down. But I will say, if you are looking for anything that is similar to this, that is inspirational and that is a God-driven book, I would highly recommend this book. It is super amazing. It is super hard to read because it deals with some harder subjects that I feel like a lot of Christians brush off and don't like to think about, but I highly recommend it. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars, besides which Frances Chan's writing style is very good, and I just felt very convicted about a lot of things in my life while I was reading it. So yeah, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. And last but certainly not least, another 5-star read, and that is Karvall by Stephanie Garber. This book was the Getting Teen Trashed pick for the month of September, and I loved it. It is so good. A lot of people compare it to Night Circus, and I have actually never read the Night Circus, so I have no idea if that is true or not. This book follows our 2 main characters, Scarlett and Tella, and they are sisters, and they live on this conquered island with their father, who's kind of like the dictator of the island. And their father is very abusive, and it is not a very good situation to be in. That's an understatement. Tella and Scarlett grew up with their grandmother telling them stories of this amazing show, circus-y type of thing called Karvall. And so, of course, both girls want to experience this. And Scarlett spends her whole childhood writing to the master of Karvall, Master Legend, and asking, will they please come to the island? Will they please come to the island so that they can see the show? But then, the week-ish, month-ish, before Scarlett's wedding, so this is years later, and she's basically continued to write to him every single year. But when her wedding approaches, Legend actually sends her tickets to Karvall and says, okay, if you can get here, you can come to the show, because it's not on their island. So they have to escape the island to get to the show. So Karvall is a game, basically, and the winner at the end of this year's Karvall gets one wish. So when they get to the island, Scarlett and Tella are separated, and Scarlett soon finds out that it's actually finding her sister Tella that is the game. So the entire like game, all the people in the game are looking for Tella, and Scarlett only has a certain number of days to find her before disaster could possibly ensue. I loved this book. It is so fantastical, and yet it's still really dark. Not really dark, but it was like this darkness also amongst all this like bright fantastical magic, and you're not sure when you're reading it because you're told multiple times throughout the story that it's all pretend, it's not real, don't get too carried away. But as you're reading it, like, it's so magical, and you don't know what's real and what's not. You start not knowing, you know, is this actually what's happening, or is this just part of like the show, like what's going on? And it is really great. I loved it, and I'm so happy and excited because I put off reading this. I got it in an Owl Crate forever ago, and I put off reading it, and I finally picked it up for this. Well, come to find, next May the sequel is being released, and that is called Legendary. And I'm so excited. I'll try to put in a picture of the cover for Legendary right here. I'm so excited for the sequel. It sets it up perfectly at the end, but this also is like a good book in and of itself. So it doesn't feel like it has to have a sequel, but I am excited for a sequel because I can't wait to read more. One thing I really loved about this book is our main character, Scarlett, actually feels and sees things in colors. Obviously we see in color, but like whenever she feels something, it's described as a color. Like she's actually seeing the color of her emotions, and it's really cool. And I thought that was going to be annoying when I first started reading it. I'm like, oh, this is going to get annoying, but then it ended up being really awesome. I thought it was a really cool descriptive tool that the author was using with specifically that character. I highly recommend this book if you guys haven't picked it up yet. I really enjoyed it, and I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that is all for my September wrap up. I'm pretty sure I have to go because I think my phone is about to die. Let me know what you guys read in the month of September. What was your favorite book? Have you read any of these books, and what did you think of them? I'll see you next time with another video real soon.